Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here, back again with the daily dose of doom and gloom. Not a whole lot to report today. According to the government, everything is just fine. Please don't divert your capital away from the big banks into some economic safe haven like precious metals, because you don't want to increase the demand and raise the price for all the big money who is doing the exact same thing. And we don't have to worry about the forward deployment of nuclear weapons to Belarus. According to the DOD, this is just Russia bluffing yet again. Never mind the plotted timeline of events that shows a clear-cut escalation towards thermonuclear Armageddon and the deployment of all these early warning detection systems that the U.S. government has just sent out to sea in the Pacific. It's all white noise, nothing to worry about. Go back to work, keep your money in the banks, buy a little Bitcoin if you want to, speculate a little bit. That's what we need more of in the economy right now, because everything is going to be just fine, with the exception of the fact that the Ukraine just called an emergency meeting of the UN. They are concerned about this forward deployment of tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus that is planned for July. Why on earth would they care? Well, we're going to talk about why this is happening, when it is happening, and what it all means in just a minute. We have another attack near Moscow. Interesting how the Ukrainians were somehow able to get a Soviet-era drone that far in to Russian airspace. Don't you think that the Russians are quite aware that they are getting assistance from the CIA? I guess we're going to find out in good time. There's probably a reason why Moscow is getting prepared to endure a nuclear war with air defense systems and anti-air guns and all the trimmings. Russia is building bunkers in Belarus that are going to warehouse the nuclear warheads that they're going to put on the Iskander missiles that Belarus has had for some time. We're going to talk about how Belarus has been preparing the groundwork for this for a long time. I'm not at all surprised. We talked about this last year, months ago, probably 6 months ago, that Belarus was eventually going to get nuked. So when I see this on the headlines, it's just like, meh, just another chain in the escalatory ladder that we long since anticipated. We have 10 fighter jets that are going there that will be armed with tactical nukes. Are they going to be armed with Kinzhal hypersonic tactical nukes? That is the question. Israel, right now, at the time of making this video, is on the brink of all-out civil war. There are hundreds of thousands, if not over 1 million people in the streets calling likely for the resignation of Benjamin Netanyahu after he fired their beloved defense minister, I presume. I don't really know all the details. Like I said, USA has deployed an early warning system in mass out in the Pacific, a variety of different ships and nuclear submarines, but there's no risk of nuclear escalation. According to the government, Norway is on high alert after detecting a Russian submarine lurking around their many undersea pipelines and communications cables. Now, this is important because, of course, Norway is the one who now provides a lot of Europe's natural gas needs. Go figure. Isn't that a coincidence now that the Russians have basically been cut out of the Euro market? Now the Norwegians are concerned that Russian submarines might engage in some sort of hybrid warfare under the sea. We have Syria war escalating as a proxy conflict between the United States, Iran, Israel, Russia, and all of the other belligerents involved in that conflict. It's incredibly confusing. We have China preparing to engage in a space war with the U.S. Is there going to be more bank failures this week? We're going to find out. We got Peter Schiff on the channel tomorrow. Be sure, if you don't want to stick around, if you have a question that you want me to ask Peter Schiff, then I will do so in our interview tomorrow. So just maybe start the sentence off with Peter Schiff, and then I will be able to do a search in the comments and pull up your question. And indeed, AI is still going to be a threat, and likely a lot sooner than a lot of people expected. Russia is rolling out their own ChatGPT version, and if you didn't know, China has done the same. So we're in the middle of an AI arms race, in the thick of a literal nuclear arms race. So let's just quickly talk about why all the fuss about this Belarusian tactical nuclear war thing. Now, the range of the Iskander missile systems, which Belarus would likely put these nuclear warheads on if they were going to be forward deployed, will be 500 kilometers, I believe. So as you can see here, this opens up the range of the more accurate Iskander missile systems and Kinzhal missile systems that Russia could potentially threaten Europe with. Tactical nuclear weapons are much different than strategic nuclear weapons. Obviously, the yield is a lot lower, but they're also a lot more precise. So what this does is this puts Kiev, Lviv, Warsaw, Vilnius, and a variety of other potential military bases within range of these Iskander missiles and the whatever are put on the warplanes. Okay, so whatever missiles they decide to mount on these 10 fighter jets that they're going to be sending there, if they're not already there already, probably MiG-31s or something like that. And the reason why this is happening is because clearly the Belarusians have been concerned about what's going on in Poland right now. The Poles are basically installing all these anti-tank barricades. There was talk that they were going to receive nuclear weapons from the U.S. If you didn't know, many nations in Europe, in the NATO alliance, already have U.S. nuclear weapons in storage. Now, they get around the Non-Proliferation Treaty, as far as I understand it, because it's a NATO alliance. So under the NATO alliance, they're able to share various weaponry, and that's how they get around. And they say, well, we're compliant with the Non-Proliferation Treaty, even though we're putting our nuclear missiles in other people's countries. There's approximately 100 of these B-61 nuclear gravity bombs. Really, I don't put too much stock in a lot of these numbers. In fact, I'm surprised that we disclose as much as we are about this conflict in the first place. It would make perfect sense if they didn't say anything about the types of weapons they were going to be sending the Ukrainians or what the initiatives are going to be if they wanted to be on the initiative. So what we got going on here, Belarus has been laying the groundwork for a long time. They had a referendum that approved a proposal to renounce their non-nuclear status. Some people are saying that this is likely going to create some unrest and some fissures in Belarus, which may see some dissent and pushback against Lukashenko, of which there has been a lot in the past. But because they have this authoritarian stronghold over their population, and they recently put into place some anti-treason laws, which I think necessitate the death penalty if you are found guilty of treason. And I'm assuming that that's going to carry over into more harsher laws for dissidents. Then it's very likely that they've planned for this, that they knew this was coming. The Ukrainians are saying that this is nuclear blackmail and that the Russians are holding the Belarusians hostage with nuclear weapons. And what my concern would be if I was a Belarusian is that if they do, in fact, launch a tactical nuclear missile from Belarus, Belarus could very well be the next war ground. They could be the sacrificial lamb. So there is going to be pushback from this because this, of course, makes Belarus a big, big nuclear target. And it is almost a way to avoid a strategic nuclear war when you can have a proxy tactical nuclear war with Belarus and Ukraine and possibly Poland, and maybe the United States lets a few rip at the same time. And this is where we may well see tactical nuclear weapons, a tactical exchange, which could ultimately evolve to a strategic nuclear exchange. Now, it's important to understand the timeline that this happened. So it's very easy to forget that just a week ago, Vladimir Putin was meeting with Xi Jinping. And don't think that they didn't talk about this as being something that was about to happen. They definitely talked about this because on that same day that Xi and Putin met was the day that the UK said that we're going to be sending depleted uranium rounds. This is in response to that also. It's likely in response also to this attack on a nuclear missile engine factory in Russia that the Ukrainian intelligence head had bragged was likely not an accident, okay, and in a roundabout way sort of took credit for this and other acts of sabotage within the country. And of course, today we have the drone attack. This is the image of the drone that the Ukrainians got close to Moscow. I believe it was about a couple hundred kilometers south of Moscow. And the Russians, whether or not the Ukrainians are admitting to it, they believe that Kiev is behind this drone attack. That's according to the Russians now. We have the Russians fortifying Moscow from nuclear attacks, improving their missile defense systems all around Moscow. And people underestimate the significance of this, the fact that Moscow is getting ready to fight a nuclear war before our eyes. Okay, they literally have S-400 that they're rolling out all over the city. They have anti-aircraft guns that they're putting out all over the city, and they're not intercepting these drones. So you would presume that Washington then would take notice of this and admit that we are most definitely at a higher risk of nuclear conflict when every single geopolitical analyst in the world is saying the same thing and has been for some time now. But they're saying that Russia is just bluffing. Don't worry, that it's not going to amount to a damn thing and everybody can just sleep tight. What it's likely going to lead to is more sanctions over these deployments of nuclear weapons in Belarus, which is a double-edged sword because it's going to hurt the European economy, and what hurts the European economy has a contagious effect to every other part of the world. So the United States banking system crisis that we're currently in the midst of. Some people say it's been extinguished for now. Other people still say it's festering and it's about to flare up once again. But this will have negative economic ramifications if they proceed with even more sanctions. And if they do some military maneuver like putting nuclear weapons into Poland. Not that it really matters because Poland's a NATO state. Again, the use of tactical nuclear weapons allows for more precision, and I've spoken to many people who've been right about a lot of things. I'm not going to name any names, but they've suggested that the United States, in fact, would not respond if Russia did use a tactical nuclear weapon in Ukraine. Now, understand the timeline. So July 1st is when these things are supposed to be delivered. Right now, they're building the bunkers to house these things. Critics say that the timeline that Russia is suggesting is way too aggressive in that they're not going to be able to get these nuclear weapons there because first they have to build a bunker that can house these things. That in itself is a signal that they must anticipate that Belarus is going to be a target of either attacks from NATO, which would explain, Poland preparing the borders with anti-tanks, Ukraine lining their border with mines. They must anticipate that Belarus is going to come under fire at some point, but the critics are saying that these delivery timelines are way too aggressive and that Russia is not going to make good. And they use as an example the upgrades to the nuclear weapons storage in Kaliningrad, which is still denied by Russia. Okay, so they were planning on doing this years ago, and it's still unknown as to whether or not they actually have nuclear weapons here, but you can bet that they probably do. So indeed, you have nukes in Kaliningrad, short-range nukes. You have Belarus, or I guess it would be intermediate-range nuclear missiles in Belarus and Kaliningrad. So Poland is in some ways kind of surrounded here as well, but everybody's really entangled because you have Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia right up against Russia as well. So it's good to just kind of know the geography of this region, even if you are somebody who is not directly impacted by this, to understand that this is going to have global repercussions as it has already on the markets and likely our way of life when we're all conscripted to go and fight. Hopefully I'll be too old by then. Hopefully they'll go for these Gen Z types again, but I don't think that. I think the Gen Z is going to set a new record for draft dodging. Iran has warned of prompt responses to any attack on bases set up at Syria's request. So we're starting to see the war intensify. There's a war potentially coming to the Iranian-Azerbaijan border as Iran continues to fortify and move their forces to the border of Azerbaijan. You have this situation going on in Israel right now where there are thousands. I think that's an understatement. It looked more like hundreds of thousands to me by the time this video gets released, possibly in the millions, even though I think Israel only has, 5 to 10 million people, but most of them are out in the streets right now. We have North Korea, who just fired 2 more ballistic missiles at the time of making this video into the Sea of Japan. China deploying weapons capable of wiping U.S. space capabilities. I just went through a wormhole there. Taiwan is considering storing U.S. ammunition, just like is being done in the Philippines and Japan. I don't have my base, my American military base that is seeking to contain China map up right now, but there are 50 to 100 United States bases that are trying to contain the Chinese right now. So you know that war with China is definitely on top of mind of most of the top brass of the U.S. military. This is a map of all the underwater cables and pipelines that Ukraine is worried about Russia snooping around. Apparently they've had submarines. They got video of it, of Russian submarines snooping around. This black here, that is the natural gas pipelines, and this other color here is telecommunications cables, okay? So there is a great potential for hybrid war, but when you see this here, you also see that it's a very resilient system by virtue of the fact that there are so many of these underwater cables and pipelines. Like if you blow one, others can make up for it, so it's not the end of the world if one gets taken out, but it could definitely impact the supply chain, okay? They claim that Russia was caught red-handed snooping on critical infrastructure. What else do we got going on here? The banks, we got record withdrawals and lack of deposit into the banks, signifying that a lot of people are diverting that capital into precious metals. And this would not be a surprise because the precious metals market is not an easy market to move. It's not like Bitcoin. You need trillions of dollars to go into precious metals in order to move it like significantly. To move the precious metals market 10%, which would be unheard of to happen so quickly, would require the infusion of around $1.75 trillion into the gold market. And of course, demand isn't always a one-to-one relationship with price. So sometimes the price can go up a lot more. When you have an additional 1 trillion of demand, that can lead to a 20 to 30% increase in the price of gold. There likely would be a pullback if it went up that much, which we may well see this week because, you know, it's a complicated system. If people are buying things on margin, if they get a margin call and they have to sell gold to pay the piper, you know, when the stock market dips again, people are going to have to sell off some of their gold in order to pay off their debts. So you're going to see these fluctuations, but I can't see gold. You know, gold is not going below 1,800 in our lifetime again, I don't think. I mean, I might be eating my words in a year. I think it's only going north from here, and of course we're measuring it in US dollars, so this all presumes that de-dollarization doesn't happen and it doesn't go to 50,000 or 100,000, which won't mean much at this point. Gold is just there to preserve value. These monstrosities right here, as I talked about in recent days, are what the United States have been deploying out to sea, ballistic missile tracking vessels, as well as this refurbished oil rig, which is now being used by the Department of Defense as another early warning system. We have submarines which have been spotted going out to sea, Ohio-class submarines, I believe, that can carry nuclear weapons. This in response to the Russians and everything else that's going on in the world. This is a Russian spy ship that's been off the coast of Hawaii for some time now. They're not sure what it's doing there, But of course, a lot of mysterious things have been happening around Hawaii, being it the biggest, Pacific base that the United States has. These green space lasers, some people presume that this is a precision-guided missile system and that the Chinese were testing. If you didn't know, there was this incident a few weeks ago, probably over a month ago now, that China was, it was determined that it was the Chinese satellites that were shining these green lasers down to one of the islands on Hawaii. I think it might have been the Big Island. And they didn't know what this was all about. They presumed that it had something to do with military. So anyways, if you want to know where to buy a house to survive nuclear war, there's a nifty little infographic map here. There really is no number one place. I mean, because we don't know how a nuclear war is going to play out. There's 2,000 warhead scenarios, 500 warhead scenarios. A lot of people are basing it around, okay, first they're going to target the missile silos, then maybe they're going to target a few other strategic points of interest in a few major cities, and you can kind of build around that. No matter where you move, there's no perfect place. And I go over this in my strategic relocation video, that you might live in a place with really, really low population density and high resource availability, but the weather is shite. Or you live in the tropics where it's beautiful and it's maybe sparsely populated, at least at certain times of the year. But then you have to contend with hurricanes. You have to contend with just wild, erratic weather patterns and all the rest. So there is no perfect place, but Denver Airport, there's probably a reason why there is a lot of activity in that neck of the woods and a lot of conspiracy surrounding what that all means. Now, I'm not a big conspiracy guy, but I say that because it's very close to the geographic center of the United States. Depending on which way the prevailing winds in the jet stream is blowing on the day that the bombs drop will determine the fallout patterns. Unfortunately, where I live, and in fact they made a documentary about this back in the 80s, all the prairie provinces in Canada, we would be in the direct path of nuclear fallout from the Russians targeting all of the Minuteman missile silos, which may well be pointless because by the time they fire their missiles, we'll get all our missiles out of the ground and they're not going to have much left to destroy, but they still, the idea is they're still going to do it anyways, or at least this is one theory of how it would play out. The thing is, we don't know exactly how the Russians would conduct a retaliatory strike. It's all theoretical. So we presume that, yes, they're going to target all these, and they got a bunch of miscellaneous military targets and possible civilian targets, but it's very, very difficult to pinpoint with any degree of accuracy. According to this map, there are places where you would be just outside the fallout zone if the worst happened. And yeah, you could go on that. Of course, one of the problems that you always run into if you're basing your preparedness strategy around the off chance, possibility that the nuclear war breaks out is you're going to be drastically restricting your lifestyle. Depending on where you're living, you're going to restrict access to various opportunities. Now that is somewhat mitigated by technology and having Zoom and teleconferencing and all that. But if you go and move into the middle of Nebraska, well, you're far away from a lot of opportunities. So you have to kind of, like I say, be a little bit cyberpunk, be a little bit Mad Max. Right now, the interest rates are absolute shite. So if you have to go into debt to buy land, you want to do it in as frugal a way as possible and be as economically strategic as you are being militarily strategic. Russia is contemplating and mulling permanently stationing its Ace-class submarines near U.S. shores, meaning that they're already planning on doing it. We are on the ass end of the jet stream right now. Look at this. It has been like this. We've been like record cold temperatures here. Meanwhile, every other place, especially the East Coast, has been having it really good this year. And Europe has been hogging all the heat. This has just been constant red for the past 6 months. Meanwhile, this jet stream just won't break. And as you can see in the Arctic, they're seeing record temperatures in the Arctic, which is just weird. And then you got record temperatures in the Antarctic as well. So this just means we're going to see way more wild and erratic weather patterns, which are going to put further stress on the supply chain. I have a guest coming on the channel next month, which is going to talk all about energy and the energy crisis. And he's going to put it in perspective in a way that not a lot of people are familiar with. Probably one of my most anticipated guests on this channel ever. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm not going to spill the beans. I'm just going to tease you a little bit. Did I talk about the Russians ramping up production of Tu-160 White Swan nuclear bombers? They're kind of similar to our B-2 bombers, like the stealth bomber, but not as advanced. So that's always good that we're in the middle of that arms race. Now, I did say I was going to talk about the AI threat. Russia is releasing their ChatGPT version. I believe it's called Sistema. Okay, the Chinese released their there's Baidu? I think it's Baidu or something like that. But all countries on the nation state level and on the corporate level are engineering these AGIs. There's a few ways that AGI is going to expedite the end of days. One of those is disinformation. Okay, as we've seen, the deep fakes are becoming hilariously accurate. For some reason, the algorithm, I watched one of these deep fakes where Arnold Schwarzenegger is being put in like a Will Ferrell movie. Arnold Schwarzenegger face on Will Ferrell, absolutely hilarious. Now it's serving them up to me all the time. So yeah, there's definitely an entertainment component to it, but it's going to be used for disinformation. That disinformation can be a catalyst and an accelerant for these conflicts that are already happening. I mean, imagine what's happening in Israel right now and what is being tweeted and shared on social media. When people are in that mob-like frenzy, it'd be very easy to influence people in that heated moment and put out some information that wasn't real, put out Netanyahu saying something about the protesters. That little thing could push people over the edge. So it could act as a catalyst for civil unrest or war between nations. Of course, you also have the possibility, and as seen in many sci-fi movies, rogue AI. So a rogue artificial general intelligence, a singularity type event where the AI becomes capable of re-engineering better versions of itself, so it learns at an exponential rate, blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, it takes over the world. There's something about that, though. I was thinking about it. It sounds almost like perpetual motion machine, like there must be some physical limitation that we're not quite factoring into our understanding of the exponential growth curve with AI. But there's also the cybersecurity issues, potential to use it to engineer a cyber attack like the world has never seen before. Okay, you could potentially be leveraging AI to learn various ways around different systems and shut down whole systems, destroy power grids, affect all aspects of critical infrastructure. So the AI threat is real, and the reason why I have to mention it in every video, because these are things that are happening at breakneck speeds that we are going to see the impacts of it this year. The other one that I don't have here is the socioeconomic effects. Okay, that's dislocating people, putting them out of jobs, which is probably going to be the best of all of these things that happens, or the least worst thing that happens. So guys, we're in the middle of a transition period as a species, the likes of which we've never seen before, with the advent of artificial general intelligence. I was watching the Sam Altman video with where he was interviewed by Lex Friedman, and I'm always suspicious when you have these entrepreneurs who are suddenly selling us this line that they have humanity's best interests at heart, and don't worry because we're going to do the right thing. We can't say the same for everybody else. But understand that the real threat here is that there will be an arms race, an AI arms race, which is currently underway. And in the current climate of global conflict it's very unlikely, if we can't come together to have some sort of nuclear treaties, that we will not have something for something as obscure as AI, as an AI treaty to try to restrict or limit how far we take this thing. And for that reason, it may not be in the United States where Skynet emerges. It may be somewhere else, okay? And once you start pairing these things with supercomputers and quantum computers, I mean, the sky is the limit for how far this is going to go. I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of the technology people embrace, including Bitcoin, is going to go the way of the dinosaur after we get over and we really break out into this artificial intelligence revolution, which we're just in the infancy of. It's a zygote right now. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Please go and check out the video I released yesterday with myself and a couple other friends where we're just shooting the breeze about post-apocalyptic barter and precious metals. We talk all about what money is. We get a little philosophical at times. And we bring in a guy who knows a little bit about Bitcoin, so we try to do the cyberpunk thing as well as the Mad Max barter thing. Go check it out, guys, and go check out our Copia YouTube channel. They were one of the guests in that video. Thanks for watching. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.